Today I'm going to talk about cities and mobility. So first, and always, if I'm going to discuss mobility, I like to stop a few minutes just to convince you that one of the biggest enemies, obviously, is cars, right? Cars are like the worst thing ever. And I know that not everybody's super convinced about that. I will strongly try to convince you that cars are the enemies. I think it's working. Why? Because of many things. First is, for instance, the space that cars take. In the left-hand side, you have beautiful Florence. On the right-hand side, you have an interchange in Atlanta in the same scale, right? I always talk about Oklahoma City. I'm from Mexico City, and 22 million people. And then you have, on the right-hand side, Oklahoma City, almost the same surface, not even close to having the same population, right? And this is mostly because of car dependency. That means we have a lot of cars in those suburban areas, and they depend on having more infrastructure and more space for parking their cars. We have like Houston on the left-hand side, but this is the view of Mexico City today. And obviously, this is how Paris would look like if Paris was in the US today, because they depend so much on this infrastructure, right? You need to move those cars. And it is very participatory how we move, because how we move means what we require tomorrow. So obviously, if everybody has a car, then they will demand more infrastructure, and we will have cities like the one on the right-hand side. This is obviously what is left for pedestrians. Whenever you have a lot of space for cars, well, the city either grows horizontally or we reduce space for pedestrians, and this is how you feel in cities like Mexico City, but also I was in Dallas, and I've been to Chicago, and I've been to Los Angeles, and there is like really limited space for pedestrians. And that's already like cities that have pedestrian space. But developing cities like Bangalore, that I was there like a couple of years ago, the pedestrian space is being strongly reduced just because, okay, cars need to pass, and cars are gigantic, right? It also creates something critical that is a social phenomena, that is there's important people and less important people. What do I mean by important people? Well, those that have a car, usually in developing countries like Mexico, they have money, and because they have money, their time is more valuable and important, and they feel it. They feel more important because I have a car, you don't, therefore your time is not valuable, and it creates this inequality. So in a developing city, like Mexico City, a driver honks at a pedestrian whenever they cross because they have this urgency, I'm important, and this happens in Bogota and in Medellin, and this is the situation of cities today, this inequality of I'm important because I drive a car. It creates angry drivers, and there's quite a few papers on how, because of traffic and congestion, it gives them a super huge feeling of like, I have to get there fast, and this congestion, why are drivers driving here? They shouldn't be here. It creates crashes, and crashes is a super interesting topic. There's 1.3 million people being killed in crashes every year, more so than war, conflict, and organized crime, and everything disaster human-made combined. So this is one of the biggest issues that we have. Like around 80 million people in the world are seriously injured by a car accident every single year. That means Germany. The size of Germany gets seriously injured every year because of a road accident, but we don't see this with this pandemic or this super severe issue because, I mean, it's cars, right? It has to happen. It's an accident. But not only that, guess who dies? Usually, in a car accident, the person that is driving doesn't die because we have built this machine that is self-protective. It's like a bubble. So in Mexico and in most of the countries, 2 out of 3 of the times that a person dies, the person wasn't even in the car. The person was a pedestrian. So that's a tragedy because actually we are creating this ecosystem where you drive, you don't, you have power, you don't, and you die because you were just walking in the streets, right? We are making cars safer for crashes, but streets are not getting safer for pedestrians. So this is actually quite a topic. Cars, beautiful cars, right? But they are parked like most of the time of the day. So that means that there's like a space usually there, as you can see them, or in a big square in whatever city, and they are just parked, occupying space most of the time of the day, and we move them in a very synchronized way, which is very challenging. That's why we have congestion. At 8 a.m., 1 million cars want to go, but at 4 a.m., nobody wants to move. So then at 4 a.m., we have a lot of parking space just there. But Besides that, there's the tragedy, for instance, of Las Vegas, and this you could observe in every city. What surface of your city is being used as a parking space? And in Las Vegas, 1 out of 3 square meters in the center is just used for parking space. And I mean, if you don't see that this is a tragedy, I think this is terrible. But let me convince you with the next one, tires. Tires, we are producing 3 billion tires every single year. And we don't know what to do with them. So really, when they get old, this is a huge issue because we don't know how to dispose them. How do we get rid of tires? We don't know. Often, they end up like this. Whenever there's a fire in a tire dump, we cannot put them out because it's too toxic for people to get close. So we just let them burn out. And this is actually how we get rid of tires today. In 2019, the number of cars that we produced in the world increased by 83 million people in that year. And it's pre-pandemic, just so that we are not considering like these issues of, okay? Births minus deaths, we created in the world only 78 million people. That means in this year, we have a higher speed of car creation in the world than human creation in the world. And this is obviously now again in 2023 and in everywhere, right? Because we want cars, but I don't, but some people. Cars are getting bigger. And I think this is super, why? Like if you see, this is the same BMW on the left-hand side, it's just the dimensions and the size, and on the right-hand side is the weight of the same car and the same model of car, but just in different years. And one would think that, well, if it's the same stupid car just driving in the same street, then it would be the same size, but it's not actually, it has increased its weight like 60% in 30 years, just because cars are getting bigger. Are they transporting more people? Actually, no. Most of the cars are single use. It was more shared 30 years ago than it is today. That means the ratio between people being transported and the weight of the car is just getting decreased because we have bigger and bigger cars. And this happens with most of the models. This is a pickup for 40 years, and it has increased nearly twice the size for transporting. Again, if you ever go to Texas, you will see this beautiful, gigantic, I don't think they fit in here, for transporting a single person. But this happens with almost every model for cars, and they are getting bigger and bigger as time passes by, and obviously there's a trend, right? You can see this trend that the cars are getting bigger. Now this is data from Mexico City, and I was super depressed. In the horizontal axis, you have time between 1980 and 2022, and in the vertical axis, this is the whole country. It tells you the number of cars, public transport units, cargo units, or motorcycles that we have in the whole country, right? Right around the year 2000, in Mexico country, we have 10 million cars. In the next 22 years, we have 35 million cars. Are we increasing this much in population? No. Most of this is because people in the US, they get a new car, electric, hybrid, Toyota, Cypress, whatever fancy name you want to put on your car that was basically just greenwashed. And that old car, because you had a car before, the old car finishes up in Mexico because the car is still used and it still pollutes in the world. So this, you see similar trends in Latin America with car ownership increased super rapidly in the past 20 years, just because the car is going to be there. And if you see car ownership in Africa is growing exponentially because of a similar process. Cars from Europe, they go somewhere, and that somewhere is a person that can use it in Africa, in India, in Bangalore, in Bangladesh. Like, really, this is the process, right? Where is it going to? Well, this is, for me, super scary because, like, I see a big parking lot, and if you go to any Latin American city today, Bogota, Medellin, or Mexico City, you will find that it became a parking lot. Like, traffic in Mexico City has become so unbearable. Okay, because we need to park so many things, no? Then manufacturing. This is gorgeous. We need to manufacture 80 million cars every single year, and that means producing around 17 tons of CO2 just for a single car, which is way above the budget that anyone should have for CO2 emissions on a single year, or on like 4 or 5 years, but it's just for producing the car. But the issue that we have here is that guess who's happy? Obviously, right? There's people that gain with this game, and that is politicians who finance their campaign with money that comes from these automotive industries that are happy if you buy a car. Get a new car, get an electric car, buy something, just because campaigns are coming, right? So if you talk to any politician, basically, and you tell them, we need less cars, it's like, not in Germany. We need less cars, maybe in India, but not here, right? And for me, this is a super interesting bit that mobility is something that is so participatory, and that's why I think the topic fits well in this symposium, is that even the way we move, talking about 15-minute city, talking about sustainability, I mean, it's also talking about something like the religion saying like, oh, no, this 15-minute city is crazy and it's against God principles of freedom of movement and so on. I found this amazing, right? Why is the church, the Catholic Church, saying something about against the 15-minute city? I always say the same thing. If the church is complaining about something that you do, then you're doing something good. Sorry if there's a Catholic in the person, a Catholic person in the room. But anyway, as you see, cars are like super bad, right? I hope I convinced you that cars are like really, really terrible. Let me show you a super simple model of car users. And that is something that actually we observe. First is that, imagine that I have in the horizontal axis the number of cars in a city, and in the vertical axis, the time it will take you to move to some destination, okay? In minutes, vertical axis. And in the horizontal axis here, we have in the left corner, no cars. In the right corner, everybody has a car, right? Because congestion, the time increases, and it's linear, is the simplest possible way to say more cars means more congestion, okay? This is usually the case for most of the transport modes. So if you try to walk through a very busy street, you have to go slightly faster, slightly slow because there are too many pedestrians, too many cyclists in Amsterdam, then you have to go slow. Too many bus users, then they take a lot of time to get in and get out. So usually more users means slightly slow, right? So here I model the number of public transport users from left very small to right very high, and there's an increase. If we force in this fake city every person to use either or one of the public transport or car, then the model should look something like this: cars plus public transport, right? And it's crossed because I'm forcing you to choose either one or the other. So if we are here, let's say, this means that there's 250,000 people using a car with that commuting time, okay? And the rest I can measure from right to left, and it says 750,000 people using public transport, okay? So it's just one that you measure from left to right, and the other that I measure from right to left, okay? Cool? What happens here is that what we're saying is public transport for this amount of people is very slow. Cars for this amount of people are very fast. So if I were living in this city and I was one of these public transport users, what would I do? I would switch to a car because it's faster, right? So here we can put some dynamics. That is, if we are here, we have to go slightly right because this system is not in equilibrium. A person that uses public transport is likely to move to using a car because it's faster. If we're on the other side, the same happens. There's too much congestion. Because too much congestion, then people might use public transport and they move. That tiny dynamic of a person moving to a car or public transport is something that gives us an equilibrium, okay? In an equilibrium is where cars and public transport take exactly the same amount of time. And we can model many interesting dynamics here, which is how long does it take, how many cars do we have, or data. Like in Mexico City, they ask individuals in a Norwegian destination survey, how would you like to move? And 15% of the people who use the public transport, they want to drive, and they will drive as soon as they have the money. And that is exactly telling you how the city is actually going to move in the next few years. The city tells you 15% of the public transport users are going to move to using a car, right? Why do we have more cars than we need? Well, again, in that system, we have an equilibrium. Usually we will converge to an equilibrium. But if you notice, the average commuting time, I now plot this tiny curve. Whereas if everyone uses public transport, okay, everyone uses public transport here, then nobody uses car, everybody uses public transport, therefore the average time is that one, right? As soon as we move, this is the average time and this is the average of these two lines. It always passes through equilibrium because it's the average of the two equal numbers. And then if everyone uses cars, then we are on the right-hand side and the time is the commuting time for cars, right? So what this shows you is a very interesting issue. The city could be faster, right? Because there's always a minimum cost that is below the equilibrium cost. And this is a type of tragedy that is similar to Bryce's paradox, where they show that a minimum cost is always below what we observe in the transport cost. That is the cost of the anarchy. This is the cost of people using an individualized system for commuting that is giving us an equilibrium, but having a slower city as a result, and that is the gray area, right? Now we also have this extra cost, because for me, I don't want to model just how slow is your city. The how slow is your city is tricky, okay? But I also want to model why we have more cars. And in this system, just with these tiny figures, what we show is that the city could be here, could be faster, and could have less cars, but because of the individualized way of moving, we move to this convergence point with far too many cars and a slower city. So you see there are two costs here, slower city and extra cars. And that was my question, why the city has extra cars, right? I can show you a paradox. That is one of my gorgeous results. This paradox is this corner scenario. The time for cars is also increasing, as we know, like the same model from left to right, it increases with more congestion. But what if I just do the math? I'm a mathematician, by the way, so I love to play with these games where we just get the right corner scenario. And that is when the time for public transport is exactly on the above line. Well, in this case, that's the equilibrium. And the equilibrium is in the corner, right? That means if we are here, if we have a cost, the average cost is this curve that you see here. Anywhere that we are, cars are faster than the public transport. So therefore, this car user is moving slightly to the right because cars are faster, right? So there is a public transport user every single day in Bogota or in Mexico City thinking cars are faster and they switch. When they switch, they create congestion. So then they increase the commuting time. But still cars are faster. So then we keep switching and switching. And the dynamic, where does it finish? Well, in the equilibrium, right? We knew the equilibrium. And here we have, why the paradox? I created a simulated fake city where the average commuting time, even if every single person in the city wants to go as fast as possible, they collectively arrive to the worst possible scenario. They are as slow as possible, right? So I found everybody minimizing a function gets you the maximum collective system, which is quite a paradoxical behavior. But also in terms of cars, you have a slow city. Again, that is the cost of paradox. And guess who's happy? Of course, right? Because in this city, you have every person is going to be driving a car. And every person is going to be car dependent, moving every single day by car. And they don't care. Like, this is actually the system of most of the cities in the US, in Canada, in Australia, as we will see in a second, by the way. But this is also a system, for instance, in Medellin. I used to live in Colombia, in Medellin, and I took these photos from the metro. In Medellin, at least Medellin has a metro. So I'm sorry, just there's always the joke between Bogota and Medellin. At least Medellin has an actual metro, and you see. But just waiting in the metro station in a peak hour means this. Which system is faster in Medellin? Well, of course, the car, eh? Just waiting here, it took me 1 hour to get a ticket. so that I could go inside the metro station. So of course, you wonder, why are these people in Bogota or in Medellin so car dependent? Well, because look at the options that they have, right? And here, twice I got a phone stolen or a wallet stolen. So of course, will you switch your commuting transport method? Yes, of course, if this is the other option, no? I mean, it's obvious. But let me show you one from Vienna, because usually people are very braggy about Vienna and this is the best city to live in, blah, blah, blah. And it's true, it's nice, I like it. And it claims to be very pedestrian friendly, right? And it is, somehow. But let me show you one challenge that I have. Maybe you've been here. This is the museum's quartier. And in the museum's quartier, there is this traffic light that for you to cross, and let me see. Yes, this is starting. So you want to cross this street and you are standing there, and Vienna has rain and snow and it's cold and it's gray and it's bleaky. It's not Latin America, I'm sorry. And you have to wait, and you see the traffic now is green and you see people crossing. And when they are crossing, they are waiting and waiting, and the traffic light is already red and the people hasn't finished making it to the other side. If you didn't make it to the other side, no worries. The traffic light is going to get green again, right? Yes, but in 85 seconds. So I measured this, and just because I have nothing to do on the weekends, I went to these museum's flats, and the result is you have 15 seconds to cross this traffic light. And if you didn't make it, no worries. Wait 85 seconds for the next traffic cycle. If then, have 15 seconds to basically run for your life. And if you don't make it, again, wait for 85 seconds, right? And it's super interesting because I have very long legs. I walk super fast. People in Austria are not as fast as I can be, right? And I don't make it. I don't make it to the other side. How is the people actually making it here in Vienna? And do you think this is a single street light in Vienna? Well, no. Again, I have nothing to do on the weekends, so I went to 4 traffic lights: Karlsplatz, Museumsplatz, Borg Theater, Schwarzenbergerplatz. They are all the same. Traffic dependency means we accommodate a small amount of time, really a few seconds, just on you pedestrian, and the rest of the time, we actually want to make it for the cars, because cars are the kings, because we want space, time, budget, allocation of any single public good today, even in Vienna, the most pedestrian-friendly city. Well, for me, this is Vienna, and this is almost every city in the world. I know that there will be questions. Let me just come quickly to the ending part. I will finish in a few seconds but there's coffee waiting for us. If we combine, let me just quickly show you, if we combine the modal uses of different people, let me combine all of the things that require your energy into something that I call active mobility, not I, but people call active mobility, A. Then let's combine everything that you use for public transport, such as trams, buses, metro, etc., as public transport. And if you use a car or Uber or taxi, let's combine it into C. So it's active mobility A, buses B, and cars C. So that's why I call it the ABC of mobility, okay? And I express it here. So in this line, you have how much you have active mobility. You have 0% or 25% active mobility in a city. Or if you're in that corner, that's 100%. Everybody either walks or cycles. Then on that axis, you measure how many people use the public transport. Either 100% is the public transport, or nobody uses the public transport. And in this axis, we have cars. So if you're here, everybody uses the car. And if you're there, nobody uses the car, right? So I know it's a bit complicated because it's showing you 3 data points, like number of active, number of buses, and number of cars in just a 2-dimensional space, that is this one. But this is a challenge. This is where most European cities collected from surveys in Europe and origin destination surveys around the world. This is where European cities are today. This is, well, around 50 to 60% of the mobility in European cities is actually cars. It's not small at all. Here we have around 35% of the mobility is active. and we have actually a very small participation of public transport in European cities, right? On the other side, we have the United States. Of course, you can see that they are here. Okay, that means in cities in the United States and in Canada, most of the mobility actually is in the lower left side of the panel. That means they actually move by cars, right? This data, let me show you just a few cities. For instance, Portland, it tells you active mobility is 12%. It tells you public transport is 13%, and cars here are 75%. That means 3 out of 4 people that go to work, they actually drive a car. They have to either drive a car themselves or somebody drives for them like an Uber, but they drive a car. Utrecht, the super cycling city of Europe, there's 74% active mobility, so people cycle to work. There's a small participation of public transport, only 4%, but also then a small participation of cars, only 22%, right? So if we do this, we see cities like Vienna with 34% active mobility, with a small participation of cars, only 27%. But this is grass and this is Linz. So in cities in Europe, we do have this challenge where there's still a high car dependency. Some policies move into being even more car participation. And if you're interested, we have compiled this data for 800 cities around the world, where now you can compare the modal share between, okay, where is everybody in the US? There's New York City, okay, there's one city with a small amount of public transport, but still actually quite high on car participation. Challenges for the participation and mobility is being here, because here you have 90% of the people move by car. Think of what is the other 10% doing. They are using the public transport, and they are usually captive users. That means they have to use the public transport, even though it's so bad, because they cannot use a car. So they actually, if you see a public transport station from Philadelphia, for instance, today, you will see why they are captive users. They want to switch, and they will switch if they have the option for driving. And they are captive for driving, for using the public transport, because it's like the only solution that they have for moving. And something interesting, if you are interested into cities and different sizes of cities and the scaling of cities, what we found here is in the horizontal axis, the city size. Cities with 100,000, 1 million, or 10 million people. And in the vertical axis is the impact or the modal share split between different cities, right? So how are cities shaping their mobility? In a very small city, active mobility, almost no public transport, and a lot of cars. And as the city grows, 1 million people here, okay, distances do become a bit painful, so then you have to start using something different, but also congestion becomes difficult. So people stop using so many cars, and then you have the participation of public transport. And as the cities grow even larger, then you have, you cannot walk everywhere in Mexico City because it's too large. You cannot drive anywhere in Mexico City because it's too slow. And then you have beautiful public transport, right? So if you're interested, we have no website where you can download the data. It's available for free. If you want to contribute with this data, please give me a call, because we are looking for more cities or more data observations or more data participations to explore more of this data. And there are quite a few papers, if you're interested, related to modal share, the public transport, and how we are modeling and trying to understand the requirements for moving people into an active mobility. And with that, I say thank you.